The Story of My Life by Hellen Keller, with her letters, 1887, 19, and 1, and a supplementary account of her education, including pages from the reports and letters of her teacher, Anne Mansfield Sullivan, by John Albert Macy, containing additional chapters by Hellen Keller. To Alexander Graham Bell, who has taught the deaf to speak and enabled the listening ear to hear speech from the Atlantic to the Rockies, I dedicate this story of my life. Editor's Preface. This book is in three parts. The first two, Miss Keller history, and the extracts from her letters, for a complete account of her life as far as she can give it. Much of her education she cannot explain herself, and since a knowledge of that is necessary to an understanding of what has writing, it was thought best to supplement her autobiography with the reports and letters of her teacher, Miss Anne Mansfield Sullivan. The addition of a fuller account of Miss Keller's personality and achievements may be unnecessary, yet it will help to make clear some of the traits of her character and the nature's teacher part of the book. The editor is responsible through all that is valid in it he awaits to authentic records and to advice of Miss Sullivan. The editor desires to express his gratitude and the gratitude of Miss Keller and Miss Sullivan to the ladies' home journal and to its editors, Mr. Edward Buck and Mr. William B. Alexander, for use in this book. All the photographs who have lent him her letters to them and given him valuable information, especially Mr. Lawrence Houghton, who supplied him with her large collection of notes and anecdotes. Mr. John Hitch, superintendent of the Volta Bureau, for the increase and diffusion of knowledge relating to the deaf, and Mr. Sophia C. Hopkins, to whom Miss Sullivan wrote those illuminating letters, the extracts from which give a better idea of her methods with her pupil than anything editor Ford published. Messer Howden, Mifflin, and Company had courteously permitted the reprinting of Miss Keller's letter to Dr. Holmes, which appeared in Over the Teacups, and one of Whittier's letters to Miss Keller, Mr. S. T. Pickard, Whittier's literary executor. Keighley sent the original of another letter from Miss Keller to Whittier. John Albert Macy, Cambridge, Massachusetts, February 1, 1903. Part 1. The Story of My Life. Chapter 1. It is within a kind of fear that I begin to write the history of my life. I have, as it were, a superstitious excitation in lifting the veil that climbs about my childhood like a golden mist. The task of writing an autobiography is a difficult one. When I try to classify my earliest impressions, I find that fat and fancy look alike across the years that link the past with the present. The woman pays the child's experience in her own fantasy. A few impressions stand out vividly from the first years of my life, but the shadows of the prison house are one the rest. Besides, many of the joys and sorrows of childhood have lost their poignancy, and many incidents of vital importance in my early education have been forgotten in the excitement of great discoveries. In order, therefore, not to be tedious, I shall try to present in a series of sketches only the episodes that seem to me to be the most interesting and important. I was born on June 27, 1880, in Tuscumbia, a little town of the northern Alabama. The family on my father's side is descended from Caspar Keller, a native of Switzerland, who settled in Maryland. One of my Swiss ancestors was the first teacher of the defeat in Zurich and wrote a book on the subject of their education. Rather than singular coincidence, though it's true that there is no king who has not had a slave among his ancestors, and no slave who has not had a king among his. My grandfather, Caspar Keller's sons, entered large tracts of land in Alabama and finally settled there. I have been told that once a year he went from Tuscumbia to Philadelphia on horseback to purchase supplies for the plantations, and my aunt has in her possession many of the letters to his family, which give charming and vivid accounts of these trips. My grandmother Keller was a daughter of one of Lafayette's aides, Alexander Moore, and granddaughter of Alexander Spotswood, an early colonial governor of Virginia. She was also second cousin to Robert E. Lee. My father, Arthur H. Keller, was a captain in the Confederate Army, and my mother, Kate Adams, was his second wife and many years younger. Her grandfather, Benjamin Adams, married Susan E. Goodhue and lived in Newbury, Massachusetts, for many years. Their son, Charles Adams, was born in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and moved to Helena, Arkansas. When the Civil War broke out, he fought on the side of the South and became a brigadier general. He married Lucy Helen Everett, who belonged to the same family of the Everetts as Edward Everett and Dr. Edward Everett Hale. After the war was over, the family moved to Memphis, Tennessee. I lived up to the time of the illness that deprived me of the sight and hearing in a tiny house consisting of a large square room and a small one, in which the servant slept. It is a custom in the South to build a small house near the homestead as an annex to be used on occasion. Such a house my father built after the Civil War, and when he married my mother, they went to live in it. Was completely covered with vines, climbing rose and honeysuckles. For the garden it looked like an arbor. The little porch was hidden from view by a screen of yellow roses and shudder smiled. It was the favorite haunt of hummingbirds and bees. The Kellen homestead where the family lived was a few steps from our little rose bower. It was called Even Green because the house and the surrounding trees and fences were covered with beautiful English. Its old-fashioned garden was the paradise of my childhood. Even in the days before my teacher came, I used to feel alone the square-seated boxwood hedge, and guided by the sense of smell would find the first violets and lilies. There too, after a fit of temper, I went to find comfort and to hide my hot face in the cool leaves and grass. What joy it was to lose myself in that garden of flowers, to wander happily from spot to spot until coming suddenly upon a beautiful vine. I recognized it by its leaves and blossom and knew it was the vine which covered to the tumble down summer house at the father end of the garden. Here also were trailing clematis, dropping jasmine, and some rare sweet flowers called butterfly lilies, because their fragile petals resemble butterflies' wings, but the rose they were loveliness of all. Never have I found in the greenhouse of the north such hair satisfying rose as the climbing rose of my southern home. They used to hang in long festoons from our porch, filling the whole air with their fragrance, untainted by any earthy smell. And in the early morning, washed in the dew, they felt so soft, so pure, I could not help wondering if they did not resemble the houses of God gardens. The beginning of my life was simple and much like every other little life. I came, I saw, I conquered, and the first baby in the family always does. There was the usual amount of discussion as to as name for me. The first baby in the family was not to be lady named. Everyone was emphatic about that. My father suggested the name of Mildred Campbell, an ancestor whom he highly esteemed, and he declined to take any further part in the discussion. My mother solved the problem by giving its heart its as her wish that I should be called after her mother, whose maiden name was Hellen Everett. But in the excitement of carrying me to church, my father lost the name on the way, very naturally, since it was one in which he had declined to have a part. When the minister asked him for it, he just remembered that it had been decided to call me after my grandmother, and he gave hers as Helen Adams. I am told that while I was still in a lost dress, I showed many signs of an eager, self-assertive disposition. Everything that I showed other people do I insisted upon imitating. At 6 months I could peep out how died, and one attracted everyone's attention by saying, "Tea, tea, tea," quite plain. Even after my illness, I remembered one of the words I had learned in these early months. It was the word weather. I continued to make some for that word after all other speech was lost. I seated, making the sound wow wow, only when I learned to spell the word. They tell me I walked the day I was a year old. My mother had just taken me out of the bathtub and was holding me in her lap when I was suddenly attracted by the flickering shadows of leaves that danced in the sunlight on the smooth floor. I split from my mother's lap and almost ran toward them. The impulse gone, I fell down and cried for her to take me up in her arms. These happy days did not last long. One brief spring musical with the song of robin and mockingbird, one summer wreath in Freud and rose, one autumn of gold and crimson sped by and leather her there, and crimson sped by and left their gift at the feet of the eager, delight child. Then, in the dreary month in February, came the illness which closed my eyes and ears and plunged me into unconsciousness of a newborn baby. They call in acute congestion of the stomach and brain. The doctor thought I could not live. Early one morning, however, the fever left me as suddenly and mysteriously as it had come. There was great rejoicing in the family that morning, but no one, not even the doctor, knew that I should never see it or hear again. I fancy Einstein had confused regulation of that illness. I especially remember the tenderness with which my mother to shoot it, me in my wailing hours of fret and pain, and the agony and bewilderment with I awoke after a tossing half sleep, and the turning my eyes, so dry and hot, to walk away from the once loved life, which came to me then and yet more than each day, but except for the fleeting memories, if indeed they be memories, it all seems very unreal, like a nightmare. Gradually, I got used to the silence and darkness that surrounded me, and forgot that I had ever been different until she came. My teacher, who was to set my spirit free. But during the first 19 months of my life, I had caught glimpses of broad green fields, a luminous sky, trees, and flowers with their darkness that followed could not wholly blot out. If we had once seen, the day is ours, and what the day has shown. Chapter 2. I cannot recall what happened during the first months after my illness. I only know that I stood in my mother's lap and clung to her dress as she went about her household duties. My hands felt every object and observed every motion, and in this way I learned to know many things. Soon I felt the need of some communication with others and began to make crude signs. And shade of the heat meant no, and a nod, yes. A palm meant come, a push, go. Was it bread that I wanted? Then I would imitate the act of curing the slash and bothering them. If I wanted my mother to make ice cream for dinner, I made the sign for working the freezer and shivered red, indicating cold. My mother, moreover, success is making me understand a good idea, a good deal. I always knew when she wished me to bring her something, and I would run upstairs or anywhere else she indicated. Indeed, I owed to her loving wisdom all that was bright and good in my long night. I understood a good deal of what was going on about me. At 5, I learned to fold and put away the clean clothes when they were brought in front the laundry, and I distinguished my own from the rest. I knew by the way my mother and aunt dressed when they were going out, and I invariably began to go with them. I was always sent for when there was company, and when the guests took their leave, I waved my hand to them. I think with a vague remembrance of the meaning of the gesture. One day some gentleman called on my mother, and I felt the shutting of the front door, and other sounds that indicated their arrival. On a sudden, threw in a ramp stairs before anyone could stop me to put on my idea of a company dress, standing before the mirror, as I had seen others do. I anointed mine head with oil and covered my face thickly with powder. Then I pinned a veil over my head so that it covered my face and fell in folds down to my shoulder, and tied an enormous bustle round my small waist, so that it dangled behind, almost meeting the hem of my skirt. Thus attired, I went down to hell, entertaining the company. I do not remember when I first realized that I was different from other people, but I knew it before my teacher came to me. I had noticed that my mother and my friends did not use signs as I did when they wanted anything done, but talked with their mouths. Sometimes I stood between two persons who were conversing and touched their lips. I couldn't understand and was vexed. I moved my lips and gesticulated frantically without result. They made me so angry at times that I kicked and screamed until I was exhausted. I think I knew when I was naughty, for I knew that it hurt Ella, my nurse, took it hurt, and when my fit of temper was over, I had a feeling aching to regret. But I cannot remember any instance in which this feeling prevented me from repeating the gnawings when I failed to get that I wanted. In those days, a little courage girl, Martha Washington, the child of, of her could, embedded an old setter and a great hunter in her day, were my constant companions. Martha Washington understood my signs, and I seldom had any difficulty in making her do just as I wished. It pleased me to domineer over her, and she generally submitted to my tyranny rather than risk a hand-to-hand encounter. I was a strong active, indifferent to consequence. I knew my own mind well enough and always had my own way, even if I had to fight tooth and nail for it. One spent a great deal of time in the kitchen, kneading dough balls, helping make ice cream, grinding coffee, quarreling over the cake bowl, and feeding the hens and turkeys that swarmed above the kitchen steps. Many of them were so tame that they would eat from my hand and let me feel them. One big gobbler, one big gobbler snatched a tomato from me one day and ran away with it, inspired perhaps by Master Gulliver's success. We carried off to the whoopie and cake which the cook had just frosted and ate every bit of it. I was cut ill afterward, and I wondered if retribution also overtook the turkey. The guinea fowl lies to hide her nest in out of the way place, and it was one of my greatest delights to hunt for the edge in the long grass. I could not tell me Martha Washington when I wanted to go at herring, but I would double my hands and put them on the ground, which meant sometimes rounds in the grass, and Martha always understood. When we were fortunate enough to find a nest, I never allowed her to carry the edge home, making her understand by emphatic signs that she might fall and break them. The sheds where the corn was stored, the stable where the horses were kept, and the yard where the cows were milked. Morning and evening were unfailing source of interest to Martha and me. The milkers would let me keep my hands on cows while they milked, and I often got well switched by the cow for my curiosity. The making ready for the Christmas was always a delight to me. Of course, I did not know what it was about, but I enjoyed the pleasant outdoors that filled the house, and the tidbits that were given to Martha Washington and me to keep us quiet when we're suddenly in the way. But that did not interfere with our pleasure in the less. They allow us to grin the spice, pick over the raisin, and lick the stirry spoons. I hurt my stocking because the others did. I cannot remember, however, that the ceremony interested me especially, nor did my curiosity cause me to wait before daily to look for my gift. Martha Washington had as great a love of mischief as I. Two little children were seated on the veranda steps one hot July afternoon. One was black as ebony, with little bunches of funny hair tied with shoestrings, sticking out all over her head like corkscrews. The other was white, with long golden curls. One child was 6 years old, the other 2 or 3 years older. The younger child was blind, that was I, and the other was Martha Washington. We were busy counting out paper dolls, but we soon wearied of this amusement, and after covering up our short trains and clipping all the leaves off the honeysuckle that were within reach, I turned my attention for Martha's crossskirt. She objected at first, but finally submitted, thinking that turn and turn about is fair play. She seized the scissors and cut off one of my cards, and would have cut them all off but for my mother's tangling interference. Belle Ardab, my other companion, was also lazy and liked to sleep by the open fire rather than to run with me. I tried hard to teach her my sign language, but she was dull and inattentive. She sometimes started and quivered with excitement. Then she became perfectly rigid, as dogs do they point a bird. I did not then know why Belle acted in this way, but I knew she was not doing as I wished. This visited me the lesson always ended in a one-sided boxing match. Belle would get up, stretch herself lazily, give one or two contemptuous sniff to the opposite side of the herd and lie down again, and I, worried and disappointed, went off in search of Martha. Many incidents of those early years are fixed in my memory, insolate but clear and indistinct, making the scent of the silent, endless, dayless life all the more intense. One day I happened to spill water on my apron, and I spread it out to dry before the fire which was flickering on the sitting room hearth. The apron did not dry quickly enough to suit me, so I drove nearer and threw it right over the hot ashes. The fire leaped into life. The flame encircled me so that in a moment my clothes were blazing. I ma- may, I made a terrific noise that brought Dinny, my old nurse, to the rescue, throwing a blanket over me. She almost fucked me, but she put out the fire, set for my hands, and here I was not that badly burned. About this time I found out the use of a key. One morning I locked my mother up in the pantry, where she was obliged to remain 3 hours, as the servants were in a detached part of the house. She kept pounding on the door while I sat outside on the porch steps and laughed with glee as I felt the jar of the pounding. This most naughty prank of mine convinced my parents that I must be taught as soon as possible. After my teacher, Miss Sullivan, came to me, I sought an early opportunity to load her in her room. I went upstairs with something which my mother made me understand I was to give to Miss Sullivan. But no sooner had I given in to her than I slammed the door to lock it and hid the key under the wardrobe in the hall. I could not be induced to tell where the key was. My father was obliged to get a ladder and take Miss Sullivan out through the window, much to my delight, months after I produced the key. When I was about 5 years old, we moved from the little vine covered house to a large new one. The family consists of my father and mother, two older half brothers, and afterward a little sister Mildred. My earliest distinct recollection of my father is making my way through great drifts of newspaper to his side and finding him alone, holding a sheet of paper before his face. I was greatly puzzled to know what he was doing. I imitated this action, even wearing his spectacles, thinking they might help solve the mystery. But I did not find out the secret for several years. Then I learned what those papers were and that my father edited out one of them. My father was most loving and indulgent, devoted to his home, seldom leaving us except in the hunting season. He was a great hunter, I have been told, and a celebrated shot. Next to his family, he loved his dogs and a gun. His hospitality was great almost to a fault, and he seldom came home without bringing a guest. His special pride was the big garden where, it was said, he raised the finest watermelons and strawberries in the country, and to me he brought the first ripe grapes and the choicest berries. I remember his caressing thought as he led me from tree to tree, from vine to vine, and his eternal delight is wherever placed me. He was a famous storyteller. After I had acquired language, he used to spell closely into my hand his cleverest anecdotes, and nothing pleased him more than to have me repeat them at an opportune moment. I was in the north, enjoying the last beautiful days of the summer of 1896 when I heard the news of my father's death. He had had a short illness. There had been a brief time of acute suffering. Then all was over. This was my first great sorrow, my first personal experience with death. How shall I write of my mother? She is so near to me that it almost seems indelicate to speak of her. For a long time I regarded my little sister as an intruder. I knew that I had ceased to be my mother's only darling, and the truth filled me with jealousy. She sat in my mother's lap constantly where I used to sit, and seemed to take up all her care and time. One day something happened which seemed to me to be adding insult to injury. At that time I had a much petted, much abused doll, which I afterward named Nancy. She was, alas, the helpless victim of the outbursts of the temper and of affection, so that she became much the worse for wear. I had dolls which talked and cried and opened and shut their eyes, yet I never loved one of them as I loved poor Nancy. She had a cradle, and I often spent an hour or more rocking her. I guarded but doll and cradle with the most jealous care. But once I discovered my little sister sleeping peacefully in the cradle, at this presumption on the part of one to once as yet no tie of love bound me. I grew angry. I rushed upon the cradle and overturned it, and she baby might have been killed had my mother not caught her as she fell. Thus she and that when we walked in the valley of twofold solitude, we now little of the tender affection that grew out of the enduring words and action and the companionship. But after a while, when I was returned to my human heritage, Mildred and I grew up into each other's hearts, so that we were content to go hand in hand where caprice led us, although she could not understand my finger language, no I heard childish prattle.